Good evening. The prosecutor's office in Paris has released disturbing details of the crash which killed Diana, Princess of Wales, in the early hours of Sunday morning. The driver, who also was killed in the crash, had a blood alcohol level more than 3 times the French limit and over twice the British one, the equivalent of 10 glasses of wine. And the Mercedes car in which Diana and her friend Dodi Al-Fayed died was apparently travelling at 121 miles an hour. Sources close to the investigation are reported as saying that the impact had jammed the speedometer on that figure. The French lawyer acting for the Al-Fayed family said Mohammed Al-Fayed, Dodi's father, was obsessed with Diana's security. His instructions were to find the truth. From Paris, our chief news correspondent, Kate Adey.
While feelings run high about responsibility for the fatal accident, there are conflicting details about the circumstances. 2 vehicles set off from the Ritz Hotel on Saturday night. A Range Rover with the Al-Fayed's official driver, a decoy which lured away half a dozen waiting photographers. And then the Mercedes with the Princess of Wales in it, driven from the rear of the hotel by Henri Paul, a member of the hotel's security staff. It also was pursued by paparazzi on motorbikes. The Mercedes was armoured and therefore somewhat unwieldy. It's thought to have entered the underpass at least 100 miles an hour. Today, the French police say that Henri Paul, who died in the crash, had over 3 times the legal level of alcohol in his blood. The most reliable witness is in hospital. Trevor Rhys-Jones, the bodyguard, who's also employed by the Al-Fayed family, was seriously injured, and he is still in intensive care. Another witness is Dr. Frédéric Maillet. He happened to drive past minutes after the crash, and he gave the princess emergency treatment.
Et donc j'ai porté secours à la jeune femme qui était derrière, qui s'est révélée être Lady Di. Moi je l'ai pas reconnue.
I went to the aid of a young woman in the back of the car who turned out to be Lady Diana, but I didn't recognize her immediately. I helped her free her upper respiratory tracts because they were in a position in which you just can't breathe if you're unconscious.
Donc je lui ai relevé la tête et je l'ai aidé à respirer.
I lifted her head and helped her breathe with an oxygen mask.
The doctor then described the photographers at the scene.
There were many of them, 10 or 15, and they were snapping away at the car non-stop.
7 photographers have been in custody since the accident. Their films have been confiscated, but other pictures are believed to have been offered for sale. Despite the evidence that the driver of the Mercedes was well over the limit, the Al-Fayed's lawyer is insisting that the blame lies with the press.
Je dis que ces photographes ont commis un délit, que ce délit c'est le délit de tentative.
I say that these photographers have committed an offence. It is the offence of an attempt of the violation of private life, and that offence caused what happened later.
The accusations fly, but the sense of loss is still more important for people here. At the British Embassy, there has been a long queue all day to sign a book of condolence. Tonight, the photographers are still in custody. It's thought that some of them may be charged tomorrow, probably with failing to assist at the scene of an accident. This is an uncomfortable time for the French authorities. The unedifying scenes in the underpass, the row about the behavior of the paparazzi, the sense that blame must lie somewhere, and all against a background of genuine sorrow about what has happened. Kate Adey, BBC News, Paris.
An expert on the effects of alcohol on driving has told the 9 o'clock news that Henri Paul was several 100% more likely to have a crash after drinking the quantity he had. Our transport correspondent Chris Wayne examines the factors which led to the crash.
Minute examination of the wrecked Mercedes and impact damage to the curb, pillars and walls of the underpass have now given police a clearer picture of what happened. At 11:30 p.m. London time, the Princess and Dodi Fayed left the Ritz Hotel in a Mercedes. They were followed by press photographers on motorbikes. At 11:40 they reached the underpass. The driver apparently lost control at well over 100 miles an hour. The car went head-on into a solid concrete pillar on the offside, then overturned, crushing the roof. It bounced back across the road and spun round, ending up facing the way it came.
A big, powerful motorcycle overtook them and kept swerving in front of them to try and slow down the car so that other photographers could come alongside. And with these blitz lights, flashlights, take pictures of the people inside. It was when this was going on that the accident happened.
This is the current model of the Mercedes S280, virtually identical to the one that crashed in Paris. It has numerous safety features. There are crumple zones to the front and the rear, but inside the passenger cell, as it's known, there are other features. There are airbags for the driver and for the front seat passenger. These are used in conjunction with special seat belts which have force limiters. Those are designed to prevent chest injuries in the event of a head-on impact. And the seat belts for the rear seat passengers are pre-tensioned. In other words, if there's a crash, they pull the passenger back into the seat. The French police say the Ritz car was armoured. That would have made it much heavier and harder to control once it became unstable. According to the hotel management, the driver had been trained in so-called defensive driving. He'd taken 2 courses organised by Mercedes. But security experts say in this case he broke the rules.
It's not the driving behaviour of a well-trained professional safe driver. It is never safe to drive at 120 miles an hour through any city or built-up area, because the opportunities for other people pulling out in front of you or unplanned parts of the road are just so great.
But there was another factor. Blood tests show the driver was more than 3 times over the French alcohol limit. Driving at speed when sober is demanding enough. Doing so under the influence is lethal.
A person would be several times, several 100% more likely to be involved in a crash at that level. All the research shows that, proved to the hilt. It's not arguable. You are more dangerous, much more likely to have an accident, certainly much more likely to have a fatal accident.
As with so many accidents, the crash which occurred beneath the Place d'Almar involved not just one but several causal factors. They combined in the space of a few seconds to turn a misjudgment into a tragedy. Christopher Wayne, BBC News.
Well, within the past few minutes, 2 American witnesses to Sunday morning's crash in Paris have been talking to our correspondent Paul Newman. They've been describing in detail the way the paparazzi were behaving.
Jack and Robin Firestone and their 12-year-old son Brandon were travelling in the back of a taxi which entered the tunnel minutes after the crash. They saw the twisted wreckage of the Mercedes from a few feet away. Tonight, after giving a police statement, they spoke of the photographer's behaviour after the accident.
What I saw, what my wife saw, were photographers swarming all over this crashed vehicle. At the time, as I said, we didn't know who was in the car. I don't think anybody, well, perhaps the photographers knew. I kind of think that they knew, because there was such a deep interest that the photographers had. They were doing these close-ups, snapping as many photographs as they could from every conceivable angle.
It was very chaotic. It was very jungle-like. There were photographers just hopping around all over the place, getting literally at least 1 or 2 of them. One for sure I remember, because there was just so much action, literally walked around the police officer and laid on the windshield, right on the windshield of the car, and was taking pictures of, which now I think would have been the princess, because as we ultimately passed, and I just didn't see any ambulance or anybody doing anything, and I was wondering what they were taking pictures, if there was even anybody in the car. And as I was turning around, and I saw a woman with blonde hair slumped over and her face turned, and I said to my husband and my son, "Oh my God, there was a woman in the car, and she must be dead." Once we found out, especially for me and the way I found out, what was just incredible is having a child who saw the same things that we saw. And my son is 12, and she's the mother of 2. And I lost my mother when I was 12. And to know what it's like not to have a mother, Princess Di or not Princess Di. But not only did those children lose a mother, the whole world lost this figure who was just a mother to everybody.
The Firestones, devastated by their experience, will return to the United States in the early hours of tomorrow morning. Paul Newman, BBC News, Paris.
The funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales, will be held on Saturday at 11 o'clock in Westminster Abbey. Buckingham Palace said it would be a unique funeral for a unique person. Her body will be taken then to Althorp in Northamptonshire, where she'll be buried in the Spencer Private Chapel. At least 2,000 people are being invited to the service in the Abbey. Many thousands more are expected to line the route of the funeral cortege, which will travel from St James's Palace into the Mall, across Horse Guards Parade, into Whitehall and then on to Parliament Square before reaching the Abbey. John Simpson reports.
Quietly, patiently, thoughtfully, people have been coming to St James's Palace all day long to sign the books of condolence. And not just to sign them, but to write personal messages to the Princess and to read what other people have written. Messages, some lengthy, some very short, about how much she meant to them and how much they miss her. It's the one way the general public can express their feelings, knowing that her body is lying private and out of sight, by the request of both families, only a few yards away in the Chapel Royal. Outside, the queue to sign the books was astonishingly long, and the most noticeable thing about it was its quietness. The extent of the public response seems to have taken everybody by surprise.
You have to be old enough to remember the funeral of Sir Winston Churchill to have seen an outpouring of affection and sympathy as great as this. The police estimate that it'll take 5 hours for the queue to work its way through, and they're keeping St James's Palace open all night long.
And it'll be open until the night before the funeral on Saturday. Everyone here knew how long they'd have to wait, and no one seemed to mind at all. Giving their time in this way was just a part of the whole thing.
Dan, darling, good day and good night. You'll be terribly missed, but we'll meet in heaven, where we'll join hands.
Dulcie Seville had come up from the East End to bring a bunch of flowers and this message.
William and Harry, at this time, God bless you. Love you eternally, Dulcie.
What was particularly noticeable was that there was such a wide range of people queuing up. There seemed, if anything, to be more young people than older ones. And there was an especially large number of black people and Asians. Time and again, people said they felt the Princess was interested in them, that she wasn't just concerned with one class or one type of people.
She was a lady of the people, but also a member of the royal family. You know, she managed to carry off the two. That sort of people relate to the people, but also, you know, could do her stately duties. She can mix in all circles, really, and there's not many people can do that.
The funeral will be on Saturday. Will you be there? Will you be watching?
Yes, I will. Hopefully I will come along with everyone else and pay last respect.
But there was some questioning of Saturday's funeral arrangements, that there might not be enough opportunity for everyone to say their goodbyes.
The route from here to there is very short route, and I expect millions of people will turn out. There no way will be enough space to see them.
It's true that the route from St James's Palace to Westminster Abbey will be short, less than a mile, down the Mall and into Horse Guards Parade. The coffin, which will probably be on a gun carriage, draped with the royal standard, will pass through Horse Guards and out into Whitehall. The royal family is clearly doing its best to ensure that no one will think there's any question of a snub to the Princess. It may not technically be a royal funeral, but it'll certainly look like one.
And so, at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, this place will be the focus of the nation's attention and the world's. There'll be no tourists then, of course, no traffic either. And although the fine details haven't yet been announced, it seems unlikely that the bells of the Abbey will toll, because the Princess, when she died, was no longer an HRH. Instead, they'll be half muffled, as they were with Winston Churchill's funeral. If anything, a more sombre and dramatic sound.
Afterwards, the body of the Princess will be taken by road to be buried privately at the Spencer family vault in Northamptonshire. Altogether, it will be, as Buckingham Palace said today, a unique funeral for a unique person. John Simpson, BBC News, Westminster Abbey.
And our court correspondent Jenny Bond is outside St James's Palace now. Jenny, can you describe the scene there tonight?
Yes, but the queues here are actually growing rather than diminishing. It's a quarter of a mile long now, the queue to sign the books of condolence, and it's going to take most people here all night to get there. The waiting time is now estimated at 7 hours. The mood is not sombre because people are talking to one another and reflecting on the Princess's life. And many of them have been to Buckingham Palace and to Harrods earlier in the day. This is their third and final port of call.
Can the royal family construct a funeral that will satisfy, that will meet the expectations of all these people?
Well, it's a tremendous dilemma for Buckingham Palace to plan this funeral in such a few short days. It's uncharted territory. What they have on their hands is planning a funeral of someone who was no longer strictly royal, but was the most popular member of that family. Someone who in many ways encapsulated everything about the royal family, and as they say, they want to reflect the affection in which she was held. She wanted to be in many ways private, but she was the most famous person in the world, probably. They had the possibility of a state funeral. That was never realistic, because that is reserved for sovereigns and a few exceptions, such as Sir Winston Churchill. There is a ceremonial royal funeral for members of the family of high military rank, and also for the consort of the sovereign and the heir to the throne, and the private royal funeral for other members of the family. But she was none of these things anymore. But they've made perhaps a virtue of that fact by saying it was a unique position, which is correct, a unique person, and it's going to be a unique occasion.
So elements of the usual royal protocol are under pressure here, Jenny.
They are indeed, but I think that in many ways they will satisfy what the princess might have wished had she ever thought of her funeral, because what will be encapsulated is a reflection of her life and her work. And that means, although we haven't the details, that many, many representatives of her charities are going to be invited to take part. It will be amongst the congregation of 2,000 in the Abbey, may indeed be invited to join in the procession itself. Many ordinary people. There will be world leaders. I believe President Chirac has expressed an interest in coming. It's possible President Clinton will be here. But what there will probably not be is the broad band of ambassadors who might have been invited from around the world. Really is a matter of routine to any other royal funeral. This will be much, much more personal.
And an occasion the like of which we will not have seen before.
No, it is quite unprecedented. I think it will be an occasion that the nation will remember forever. Saturday will come and the streets will be deserted because many, many shops are going to close, supermarkets will close, the National Lottery will not be drawn on that day, the National Trust is closing its houses for much of the day. It will be an occasion when the nation will, because it is a Saturday and so many people will not have to work, the nation will be able to take part either by coming out here onto the streets, as so many have already, or by staying at home and watching it on television.
Jenny Bond, thank you very much. The mood of shock and sadness has spread throughout the country, with people anxious to express their feelings of loss. Special services have been held in schools and churches, and millions of flowers have been laid in tribute.
Outside Buckingham Palace throughout the day, the grief for some has been all-embracing. The sea of flowers that has steadily spread across the pavement, speaking with silent eloquence of the depth of affection that many held the princess in. Rush hour commuters stopped here briefly to reflect on the weekend's tragedy. The palace's ever-present foreign visitors too have still been coming to terms with what they can barely believe. Diana's appeal was truly international. And a few miles away at Kensington Palace, Diana's former London home, as great an upsurge in emotion. This has effectively become a garden of remembrance. Everyone here, young and old, simply wanted to pay their last respects to the princess they regarded as their own.
Well, she's special because she brings light to the world about all the sadness that's going on in the world. The landmine and those people with AIDS.
She did what she cared about, and she loved everyone.
I wish she was alive to do many more for the country, you know, but sadly God decided to take her, so we just had to pray for her, you know.
Across Britain, the feeling is the same. In Liverpool, at a hospital opened by the princess nearly 2 years ago, there's growing support for it to be renamed in her memory. In Birmingham, an oak tree planted by Diana in the grounds of the city cathedral has become a focal point for those united by a shared sense of loss.
We've kept the day as a day of quiet, a day of mourning today here in Birmingham. So it's been a very dignified and yet very meaningful and deeply moving day.
At school assemblies too, such as this one at Pemberton High School in Wigan, the national mood has been reflected. Some pupils here are the same age as Diana's sons.
So this morning we have gathered together as a school
pay respect and to acknowledge the life of this person.
And this morning in the City of London, the usually frenetic dealing floor activity was stilled as staff held a minute's silence. Buckingham Palace's own official computer website on the internet has been given a black border and space for people to offer their messages of condolence. Tens of thousands have been left so far. Those visiting the site are heading into the millions. And at Harrods, the Knightsbridge store owned by the Al Fayed family, the Union flag has been flying at half-mast. The store's famous display of exterior nighttime light bulbs has been turned off. Shoppers have been signing a book of condolence. The shop will be shut on Saturday. Elsewhere, major supermarkets have chosen to close on Saturday morning. A 2-minute silence is planned at main railway stations. Many sporting fixtures are being cancelled. Amid the floral tributes, a message to Diana and Dodi Fayed as a couple. Their growing companionship is said to have made the princess's last few weeks some of the happiest of her life. And among the bouquets as well, many simple presents. Each and every one an affectionate gesture for the people's princess, who will be so missed by so many. Clarence Mitchell, BBC News.
After the ceremony at Westminster Abbey on Saturday, the body of Diana, Princess of Wales, will be taken back to the chapel near her family home, Althorp House, in Northamptonshire. Diana spent much of her early life at Althorp and was known and loved by local people, many of whom took the opportunity today to express their grief at her loss. Alison Holt has spent the day with them.
The gates of Althorp House, the Spencer family home, have been closed all day, but outside the drift of flowers has grown with each hour that passes. This was an area which Princess Diana knew well, and many people have congregated here to pay their respects, jamming the normally quiet country road with traffic. For people, it was a time to reflect and a time to grieve for a princess who spent many childhood years here.
She's such a lovely person. Definitely. Be very sadly missed.
This is just Northamptonshire home, and it's Northamptonshire people expressing their sorrow, I'm sure.
I thought a lot of Princess Diana. I thought she'd done a lot of good for the country, and because it wasn't too far away, I could get her to bring some flowers and pay my respects.
Across the fields at Althorp House, the flag flies at half-mast. The Spencer family have been a part of village life here for 500 years. Betty Andrew worked as a cook at the house. Now more than ever, she treasures her memories of Princess Diana growing up.
She was natural, yes, yeah. She was a typical girl, really, and I mean, she used to enjoy going around the park, and especially when Charles came home, a baby brother, when he came home from school, she used to look after him and do his washing.
The Spencer family have their own chapel and vault within the local church. It's here that the princess will be buried, alongside 20 generations of her ancestors, including her father, who died 5 years ago. But one local historian worries about how the village will cope with the many people who will want to visit her last resting place.
The family vault is beneath the Spencer Chapel, which is behind iron gates. There will be no place that people can come and lay flowers on the grave. It isn't equipped for a pilgrimage centre, but I'm afraid I think it will become that.
Some of the people here have travelled hundreds of miles. Others have come from local villages. They come from all walks of life, but they're united in their deep sense of loss. It means that Princess Diana's family home and the church where on Saturday she'll be laid to rest have already become places of pilgrimage. Alison Holt, BBC News, Northamptonshire.
The people of Wales feel a special attachment to the princess, who, after her divorce, insisted that Wales should remain as part of her title. From Cardiff, Tim Hirsch.
To her many Welsh admirers, Diana's title as Princess of Wales was far more than a formality. At City Hall in Cardiff, they came to mourn the end of the special relationship between Wales and its princess. This is where it had begun, shortly after her wedding, when she accepted the freedom of the capital city in Welsh.
Diolch yn fawr.
With the devolution referendum campaign suspended for the week, the Welsh Secretary Ron Davies led the signing of a Welsh Book of Condolence.
I do feel that the people of Cardiff miss her not only as a world-famous personality, but as almost a friend, somebody that they felt they could lean out and touch.
Those feelings were echoed by some of the thousands who queued at City Hall.
Well, she's our princess, or she was. The Welsh, I think they owe it to her. I think the world owes it to her.
She'll live on in Wales and throughout, I should imagine.
Diana's last visit to Wales was 2 years ago when she persuaded Luciano Pavarotti to perform at a gala concert in aid of a children's hospice. She was expected to return next month.
The Prince of Wales is due to host a reception here, and they were negotiating to have a joint reception with Diana and indeed the children William and Harry as well. So it really is very, very sad that we are now not going to see her ever again in the Principality, of which she was so proud to be princess.
The loss will be felt greatly by the Welsh rugby team. Diana counted herself an avid fan. Meanwhile, the happy scenes at Carnarvon Castle, where the Prince of Wales brought his new bride to see the site of his investiture, seemed today a distant memory. Tim Hirsch, BBC News, Cardiff.
Members of the royal family, including Prince William and Prince Harry, have spent the day in private at Balmoral. Messages of condolence and flowers have been delivered to the castle. And throughout Scotland, people have been expressing their sorrow. Our Scotland correspondent, Andrew Castle.
The seclusion of Balmoral, deep in the Scottish Highlands, is highly valued by the royal family. Prince Charles has described this holiday retreat as the best place in the world, and today its isolation has allowed him and his 2 sons to mourn in private, well out of sight of the constant stream of tourists who have continued to stop off here all day. Some have left flowers, small tributes from around Britain and across the world. This afternoon, more flowers were delivered on behalf of the people of Aberdeen, a city which has become accustomed to the royal presence for more than 100 years.
There seems to be a stunned silence. I've never seen a city like as it is. I don't know, nobody can believe it, I don't think. And I think possibly until the funeral on the Saturday, it just seems to be, it's like a fairy tale of something, it's unreal.
In Glasgow, they paid tribute with a wreath-laying ceremony. Thousands queued for hours to sign a book of condolence at the council chambers in the city centre. All ages were among those who paid tribute to a princess whose ability to reach out to ordinary people helped relatives of those murdered at Dunblane when they met in London.
It was relaxing, she made everybody feel at home, and she was a mother speaking to parents who had lost their children, and she had a real understanding and empathy with them.
The death has been marked in all parts, however distant. Across Shetland, flags were flown at half-mast. Visiting vessels in Lerwick paid similar tribute.
Political hostilities in the devolution referendum campaign have been brought to an abrupt halt, along with much of government business. Political activity north of the border will not resume until after Saturday's funeral. In the meantime, the royal family are expected to remain here at Balmoral until they're ready to make the journey south to London. Andrew Castle, BBC News, on Royal Deeside.
The chairman of the Press Complaints Commission, Lord Wakeham, has launched a review of the problems caused by the so-called paparazzi, the mainly freelance international photographers who'd pursued the princess for so many years. Lord Wakeham says he's begun discussions with editors across the news media to see what can be done. Our media correspondent Nick Hyam reports.
News that Princess Diana's driver had been drinking took some of the pressure off journalists and the media today. Many had blamed them for causing her death. But the paparazzi have become an issue that won't go away. The Press Complaints Commission wants editors' views on future dealings with them, including a voluntary ban on buying their pictures. This paper's editor says it's not that simple.
If we all feel, the consumers and the media, all feel together that there's got to be a different way of doing things, and there will be a different way. But as long as, frankly, the public want to buy this sort of tasteless material, many of us are deeply embarrassed. I feel embarrassed to be part of the same trade as the paparazzi. But as long as there are vast numbers of consumers out there, then I'm afraid there's going to be people supplying them.
Today's papers can expect bumper sales reflecting intense public interest in the princess. National tabloid editors wouldn't give interviews, but former editors thought a ban on paparazzi pictures unworkable.
As you can be sure as eggs, that you are going to get a situation where they say, right, we will not deal anymore, and then suddenly a picture comes that is so important that they have to use it, as in the case of Dodi and Diana in the boat.
Even if you got every editor in Britain, and it's mainly the tabloids we're talking about here, every editor agreed to ban all paparazzi pictures, they'd still be sold in Australia, in America, the royal family still. I don't think there'll be much of an interest in Charles and Camilla because they don't have that kind of charisma. William is a very handsome young man. He will be going out with very beautiful young women, and the frenzy will be on again.
At one stage, this London picture agency offered newspapers close-up photographs of the princess in the car after the accident. It withdrew them after her death. But Germany's biggest-selling daily, Bild, did carry a picture showing rescuers trying to free the trapped occupants. German editors say they simply give readers what they want, while celebrities enjoy the publicity.
Important people like to see their photographs printed, so this is in order. But if there is something like happened on the night from Saturday to Sunday, it's evil and it's disgusting.
Germany's Chancellor Kohl tonight suggested his country and Britain should act together to thwart the paparazzi. In Whitehall, where flags flew at half-mast, the government's also under pressure from some backbenchers to act, but believes it's far too early to be talking of possible legislation. Nick Hyam, BBC News.
Delegates at an international conference in Oslo trying to agree a worldwide ban on landmines have been paying tribute to the princess, who'd campaigned throughout the past year for a ban. As Jonathan Charles reports from the conference, there have been calls for a treaty to be named after the princess.
Norway is planning its own special tribute to Princess Diana. Oslo, already home to the Nobel Peace Prize, may soon also be known as the birthplace of an international treaty which could bear her name.
I ask you all to raise and to observe 1 minute silence in memory of Diana, Princess of Wales.
Diplomats from more than 100 countries stood in silent tribute. They're gathered in Oslo to make progress on a cause Princess Diana adopted as her own. Their efforts to agree a global ban on landmines had been given added momentum by her work. A treaty named after her, they believe, would be a fitting memorial.
I think it's an interesting idea. She certainly was so important for this cause. She was among the first to take on the cause, and she was such an encouragement for those who was really working on this matter in the field.
It was just 3 weeks ago that Princess Diana visited Bosnia, using her ability to attract publicity to highlight the damage caused by landmines. Many civilians have been injured by the more than 3 million mines buried there during the war. Amongst those the princess saw in August was 15-year-old Mirzeta Garbelic. Today she expressed her sorrow at the princess's death.
If only I could, I'd like to send a letter to her family to say how sorry I am. I'm really shaken.
Every 20 minutes, someone around the world is injured by a landmine. Armies regard them as a cheap form of defense. Even the Americans want some exceptions to any global ban.
We are here to see if it's possible for this treaty to be structured in a way that would allow the United States to sign it.
But at an official reception this evening, diplomats were optimistic. A treaty could be ready by December, just as the princess had hoped. Princess Diana's memory and her campaigning won't be forgotten here. The events of the past 48 hours have served only to increase the pressure on diplomats. They must now find a way of turning her dream into reality. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Oslo.
Well, in the United States, Elizabeth Dole, who worked closely with the princess, has told the BBC she'll keep up the pressure on President Clinton to sign up to the landmines treaty. The American government has said it wants mines which destroy themselves after a preset period to be excluded from the negotiations. Our Washington correspondent Stephen Sacker reports.
May we ask you to stand for a moment of silence to remember the tragic and...
Americans are mourning Diana as if she were one of their own. The US Open tennis tournament paid silent tribute. Many top players had met Diana and shared the sense of loss.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
In this land of celebrity, the nature of Diana's death has prompted an outpouring of pain and anger from the rich and famous, all directed at the intrusive press.
Because you have no place to go. You're in a car, you're going faster and faster to try and get away from them. They can shoot through darkened windows, and you end up in a corner of the car. And she must have known such fear.
Princess Diana had put her fame to good use in the US. She became close to Elizabeth Dole, head of the American Red Cross, and now ardent campaigner against landmines. Today, Mrs. Dole told us Diana's work would be continued.
I want to do this in her memory. I can assure you that there will be many of us who will be working hard to carry on what she has done.
President Clinton, still holidaying on Martha's Vineyard, has yet to decide whether he will journey to London for Princess Diana's funeral, an event which will be aired live across America. People continue to flock to the British Embassy here. Many are signing a book of condolence. Outside, amid the flowers and the flickering candles, it's easy to understand why Diana felt so comfortable in America. She was appreciated unreservedly. There was no critical audience. Princess Diana was immensely popular with millions of ordinary Americans. She also had a large number of powerful friends here, and they will ensure that the causes dear to her heart continue to enjoy a high profile in the United States. Stephen Sacker, BBC News, Washington.
And now the rest of the news. The Ulster Unionist Party